first and greatest fingerpicking songs of all time. When I say first, one of the first ones I learned when I was just a young tyke. Freight Train by Elizabeth Cotten. Now, we're going to play, I'm not going to teach exactly what I played right there, but I do have tablature and we'll follow the tab pretty accurately at times. But this is a song that you really just have to keep a fairly steady Travis picking pattern going for. But interestingly, of course, Elizabeth Cotten, who wrote this song when she was 12 years old. This was in about 1907. As I recall, she was born in 1895, give or take a couple of years. So as a young girl who'd been playing the guitar for just a few years, when she was about 5, she picked up the banjo. When she was about 8, she switched over to the guitar and started just making up songs and spent her life just kind of being a domestic worker, cleaning people's houses and keeping things straightened and stuff like that, kind of going about a relatively normal lifestyle for folks back then, but loving to play the guitar and sing. Well, she put it down for a long time, many years, at least 20, probably 25 years or so. And in the 40s, she was still working, doing domestic work and stuff like that, and occasionally working at Pete Seeger's house, keeping his house in order. So somehow they got to talking about music, and Elizabeth mentioned to Pete that she used to play the guitar. So she picked up the guitar, and I'm sure Pete looked at it and said, she's holding it the wrong way. So she played the guitar upside, what we would consider upside down, like this, a normal right-handed guitar, but played it with her left hand plucking the strings and her right hand on the fingerboard. Now, having not taken formal lessons, obviously, she had developed a style of playing just like what I played right there, but with the guitar strung essentially upside down, which means she was playing alternating bass notes with her index finger. So she was using her finger up here to play the bass notes and her thumb down here to play the melody notes. She did all this with just a thumb and finger, kept her other fingers anchored down here. Again, no formal lessons. But she just learned how to play like this. This is now known as cotton picking in honor of Elizabeth Cotten. So as time went on through the 40s and 50s, she became a kind of local celebrity for being like the real deal, a real piece of American culture and folklore. And managed to make quite a few albums and perform. She showed up at folk festivals. She lived into the 90s. She lived to be 92 or 93 and died in the late 80s, I believe. I think that was at 87 or something. So she is really considered an American musical treasure, and everybody should learn Freight Train for a lot of reasons. But one of them is it's not really that hard. It's a great way to introduce yourself to keeping a steady alternating bass going and picking out a very simple melody. Now, as I played through that, all there were pinches in there. Everything was played at the speed of quarter notes. I could dress it up a little bit by mixing in syncopating the melody a little bit. By messing up the bass notes and things like that. So and that just gave it a little bit more interest. Use a very simple chord progression. We'll talk about that as we break this down a little bit more. You really just need two main chords, C and G, and then also E and F. Now, she played the F with her thumb wrapped around the top of the neck or the bottom of the neck, depending on which way you want to think of that. But in either case, with the wraparound thumb technique, you're able to do a couple of things on an F chord that are very difficult to do otherwise, and the main one is a hammer-on on the G string from G to A. So if you want to work on the thumb wrap technique, you'll be able to get a little more authentic sound in there, but it's not necessary. The whole thing can be done with a bar, or it could also be done with a little F by changing the bass note to C. We'll talk about that as we break this down a little bit more too. And we will have a sing-along. So there's a sheet there that has the lyrics and the chart, basically just the chords and lyrics. So it's a very easy one to just run through any old way you want. You can sing the song. It's a lot of fun. You can hear it on, actually there's even a Jerry Garcia version on his Not for Kids Only album that you can hear this on. So anyway, without rambling on too much more, let's take a look around the corner at breaking down Freight Train. Let's get the tablature and music and take a look at the first verse, which is kind of the simplest way of playing through Freight Train. So the general chord progression, which is also on the chart page that has just chords at the top, is very simple. 2 measures of C, 2 measures of G. Second line, 2 measures of G, 2 measures of C. In the third line, we get into what you almost could consider the chorus, but it goes to E or E7 for a couple measures and F for 2 measures. And then back to C for 2, or back to C for 1, G for 1, and back to C. So it's a very solid 16 measure chord progression. C, C, G, G. And any of these G's could turn into G7s in the later on as they go back to C. We have our E to E7 maybe, to F twice, back to C to G to C. So be familiar with the chord progression first. Even just practice strumming through it, looking at the page that has those charts on it. Now, what the tablature has is an exact arrangement that you can use to get the melody coming out in most spots. So we're going to play the C chords. Most of the C chords in this song are played with G in the bass. So we're going to open up on a C with G in the bass, which means we've got our third finger on G on the 6th string, second finger on E on the 4th string. Then we have the C on the 1st fret of the 2nd string, and the high G is where the melody starts. So the first line, we pick out 4 bass notes in every measure. That would be the first 2 measures of C, and all I'd need to do to change to the G chord that happens in the 3rd measure is take off my 1st and 2nd fingers, and now I've got essentially a G chord. So very little changes going on in this section. So we can dress this up a little bit with mostly a little fancier stuff on the E chord and the F chord. Some hammer-ons on the E and maybe a little bending of the note on the F. And this is all the kind of stuff that we hear Elizabeth Cotten do in her playing and just about anybody else that messes around with it. So looking at the second verse, pretty much the singing over the C and the G chords could be the same. If you're singing this song, it doesn't have to be too fancy. So playing through those, we've got it almost, maybe even identical to the first verse. You notice there was a little bit of a difference, right? And it was just in the second line, there was a little bit of syncopation where the melody notes that had been pinched in the first line were now set a half a beat late. So in the second line we have the G and now the F coming in after the melody. So nothing too fancy there, just shifting those notes a half a beat late in order to get a slightly different sound. But Freight Train is also a pretty easy and fun song to sing. When you're going to sing a song like this, you don't need to be as fancy on the guitar. So you can almost just keep anything going. And run through the chords. Again, I'm going to keep the G and the bass on the C chord, and I'm just going to sing through some of the verses that we hear in there so that you can hear what this song sounds like. Freight train, runs so fast.